Good day, everybody. We are going to be talking about trophic structure and energy flow today. Uh, so let's go ahead and go. So one of the first words you should know about are producers, and producers is a very general term referring to many different organisms that make their own food. One of the common ways is through photosynthesis. They're using the sunlight and carbon dioxide from the air and water to produce sugar. And we've talked about photosynthesis before, so you should be familiar with that. So there's lots of different photosynthesizing organisms out there. One of them is phytoplankton. This is a marine organism. We see it in the oceans, and it's floating all over the place. Some of the things that you're seeing here are things called diatoms, and they've left fossils behind for several million years because of calcium in them. Another type of producer would be plants, and you see the sheep here in Ireland grazing on the grass, and again, they do photosynthesis. Notice we go back and forth, something in common. They're green. They have that chlorophyll to help them take the energy from the sun and convert it into sugar. Right? Another one would be chemosynthetic bacteria. So you can't really see the chemosynthetic bacteria in the picture, but it's the base of this food chain, of this food web. The little bacteria over here, a little capsule-shaped bacteria. It's using carbon dioxide, it's using hydrogen sulfide that comes up from inside the earth. It's using the heat, and it's building sugar. Again, we need to take all of that stuff and make sugar. That's what we're storing the energy with. Consumers get their energy from those producers or other things that have produced those. So really common examples are herbivores. They go and they eat the plants, like this cute little rabbit. And we have things, animals will do that. There are other things that eat things, but mostly we think of animals this way. Another one of those things that's a consumer is this amoeba, and you can see it's eating this little bit of, looks like plankton right there. It's engulfing that, and that's going to be absorbed into the amoeba. So amoebas are part of the protists or protozoans. They're single-celled organisms. Another consumer, we have these tomb worms. What are they consuming? They're actually consuming that chemosynthetic bacteria. And these, again, are found down at these deep sea vents that we've talked about before that have the hot water, the hydrogen sulfide gas, the carbon dioxide. And again, this is where we think some of the first Earth on life came from, those archaebacteria, those chemosynthetic bacteria. All right, go ahead and pause for a second here and list some examples of producers for marine, terrestrial, and aquatic ecosystems. If you can't do that, you should be able to go back in the video, take a look. I gave you examples of each. The aquatic might be a little bit harder, but you should still be able to find it. So go ahead and pause and write that down. All right, so here are some examples of producers for marine, terrestrial, and aquatic life. We have right here, this is a kelp forest, which is a marine. We have this is barley actually, used for making some bread, some of the first crops cultivated. And then we have this deep sea vent, this smoker, and that's creating, we have our cyanobacteria. Again, you can't really see the cyanobacteria, but we know they're there. And then this is a water hyacinth. It's a plant that's found in fresh water. There you go. So primary consumers is the term that we give to those first things that eat the producer. So this snail is grazing along on this plant right here. And it's getting the energy from the producer that the producer got from, in this case, it would have been the sun. And we have this little arrow right here to show the energy flow. It doesn't mean the grass is eating the snail, it means the snail is eating the grass, the little plant there. Secondary consumer, here's our little snail. This is our primary consumer. It's being eaten by the secondary consumer. A tertiary eats the secondary. So the bird eats the snail, the snake's eating the bird. quaternary consumer is when we have that thing that ate the tertiary. So our hawk is eating the snake, which you see right here. The snake ate the bird ate the snail, and the snail eats the grass, the plant, the producer. Right? So list some examples of primary consumers for marine, terrestrial, and aquatic. I only gave you one system. Go ahead and research a couple more examples or talk to somebody about that. Right? So here we have a lot of different ecosystems. We have this elk that's grazing on the grasses. We have this grasshopper that is eating the leaf. We have these sponges. Sponges are actually animals. They are pumping water through, and that sends the phytoplankton through, that sun plankton, and it takes its energy from that. So this is actually a primary consumer. It's not a plant, it's a consumer, it's an animal. And then we have this Plecostomus, which is a freshwater little fish, and this eats the algae that grows on rocks and things like that. Detritivores are actually, can think of them as decomposers, but they break down matter. So they physically break it down. They make it smaller. They're not changing the chemicals, things like that, but they're breaking into smaller pieces. And some common examples would be worms, beetles, crabs. They go around and break those things down. Some bigger things you think of, a type of detritivore would be a scavenger, like a hyena or vulture. They're going for carrion. That's big dead animal carcasses. So they're taking those and breaking those down further. But again, a real common example, worms, beetles, insects, a lot of things like that. When we think of decomposers, one of the most common things you think of are fungi. This mushroom right here. A lot of times you find fungi on animal waste. You find it on dead organisms. You find it on litter, the leaves and things that are kind of slowly decaying due to bacteria. And again, bacteria and mold are other types of decomposers. So they're turning that dead matter, that dying matter, into things that those plants can use. So what's the difference between a detritivore and a decomposer? So here's a couple examples, a nice little T-chart. I'd write these things down, but detritivores are breaking things down, making it smaller, and then the decomposers are breaking it down, they're decaying it, they're changing it, the chemical composition, they're absorbing it. So those are a couple of the things. So now we're moving into kind of this trophic structure level where we have how does the energy, the matter travel from one organism to another. So if we take the energy from the sun, these diatoms, these phytoplankton, they absorb that sunlight and they're changing into chemical stored energy of the sugar. Well, how's that get to this tuna up here? Eventually you have to go through a couple levels. So we have the energy is going to this little sardine. The sardine then gets eaten by the tuna. And again, we're showing the energy flow with the arrows. So identify the producer, the primary consumer, and the secondary consumer in this terrestrial food chain. Go ahead, see if you can do that. Push pause if you need to. All right, so we have right here the producer is the grass. Maybe you were figure that out because it's green. But I guess the grasshopper is also green, so that might throw you off. But the producer is the grass. It does the photosynthesis. The primary consumer eats the grass. The secondary consumer eats the primary consumer. It's nice and easy and linear here. It's not always that way, but we can see it. We're simplifying it. Food webs are more complex. You see the arrows are going all over the place. They're all interconnected. This is more realistic than a simple food chain. So the ant can be eaten by the scorpion or the bird. The bird might even eat the scorpion, which ate the ant. So it's all over the place. So we show this interconnectedness, and if you notice, it's kind of going up in a triangle. And, oh, can't see that. Let's get not our highlighter, but our pen. We have our little pyramid. There we go. And this pyramid is going to mean a little bit more to you in just a bit. So identify a tertiary consumer. we're going to count up. So we have our producer right down here, the grass. We have our primary consumers. We have our secondary consumers. And then right up here, that's our tertiary in our food web. So if you picked either the fox or the snake, both of those would be correct. Now, one of the cool things I said about this pyramid, this is not just chance. This is because you need lots of the producer down here to support these organisms of the consumers. In fact, there's a rule of 10%. If we have 10,000 kilocalories worth of food down here, that means we can support 1,000 kilocalories of primary consumers, and then 100 kilocalories of those secondary, 10 of the tertiary, and 1 for our final quaternary consumers. So this works with calories. It could also work with tons. So we could be talking about the biomass of this area. So if we had 10,000 tons of grass, that would support 1,000 tons of these primary consumers, and so on. It works with energy and joules. It works with mass, like I said. It could be talking about just a specific element, like tons of nitrogen, all that. Same thing, rule of 10%. Right, so here's a problem for you to practice. If there are 100 million kilograms of producers in an area, how many tons of primary consumers can it support? So go ahead and think about that for just a little bit. Remember the rule of 10%. Try and work that math out. So I did 0.1 because that's the same as 10%. 0.1 times 100 million kilograms, there's my 100 million right up there, equals 1 million kilograms. Right? So again, I have the gibbon. That's a primary consumer. It's eating all these leaves. So for a 100 million kilograms of rainforest, I could support 1 million kilograms of primary consumer. Let's look at the pyramid again, a little different problem. If a quaternary consumer requires 2,000 kcal per day to live, how many kcals must the producers produce each day to support that quaternary consumer? So my recommendation, work backwards. So you're increasing by the rule of 10 each time. Push pause, try the math. Right, so here we have the calculations. 2,000 times 10 times 10. I'm going down each level, as you see there. So I would be able to support 2 million kcals. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I would need 2 million kcals from the producer to support 2,000 kcals of quaternary.